Well, welcome to our May additional session for the structural modeling project. Kevin Dye is going to present or continue to discuss the details of a dialogue process as it's implemented in a large organization. Kevin, take it away.
Okay, so when last we talked, Janet Singer suggested that we go over some diagrammatic treatment of the outline we went through. Last time we went through the table of contents of a new book that's codenamed The Playbook, and it's intended to be a step-by-step guide to conducting structured dialogue, also known as structured dialogic design, structured democratic dialogue, interactive management, Cognoscope. It's had a bunch of different names. And previous literature about this for practitioners were written in more of a scientific way, where, for example, the book Interactive Management Handbook would say, do this and this, and if you want the details on this next step, then go look at the book Societal Systems, and it wouldn't give you any details. And so you go to the book Societal Systems, which is out of print, and then you get through Societal Systems is by Janet Moorfield. You go through that book, and it says, for the details on this step, see the following journal articles in the IEEE Transactions, Systems Man, and Cybernetics. And you go to those journal articles, and it says, see these earlier journal articles. And when I was first learning about interactive management, I went through this for 2 years, and luckily I had a professional librarian assigned to me to collect up all the references. And there were 700 references. And they did interlibrary loan requests. And of course they had licenses to journals, and they could reach across a pretty big network for books. But it took me a couple of years to assemble the 700 references and go through them. And it's hardly anyone wants to do that if they just want to be a practitioner. If they don't do it, they become a practitioner in kind of a surface way. I don't like the word superficial because it has a negative tone, but we like practitioners to be able to contribute to the science and methodology itself. And one of the things that practitioners in the facilitation arts are notorious for is their unbridled, spur-of-the-moment innovation. People that are facilitators, in my experience, majority of them, or a lot of them, have a personality that they like to be creative. They like to think of themselves as creative. They like to be conducting what they call creativity. They'll characterize the dialogues as creativity sessions. And they like to think of themselves as innovating methodology on the spot. And can you imagine if your surgeon did that? Just like to be creative at the spur of the moment. And yet the events that facilitators conduct cost a lot more than even an expensive surgery. A number of the events I was involved with, the participants' time for involvement was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it's my contention that you should be using an evidence-based practice if you to follow the model of medicine. you should do something that's evidence-based, and you should. My contention is you should not be innovating the methodology on this burden unless you have no choice. So this book is intended to kind of give people enough background on why we're doing things. So each section of this book, as you remember from last time that I went over the table of contents, it's organized by a calendar. What happens 3 months before an event, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 weeks, and so forth. And each section within that, there's activities, and there's about 80 activities. Each activity says what you're going to do and why you're going to do it in a certain way. And then we go into how to do it and which options you might have on alternatives. In most cases, if you have to change the process that you started out on, it might not be a very well thought out process. And we've hardly ever seen the need to change a process that's been set out in an agenda ahead of time in interactive management. And the agendas, as a result, are typically followed within minutes of what the agenda says will be done. And then each section concludes with the list of deliverables from that activity and who's responsible for it. Is it someone on the facilitation team, or is it someone on the client side, the participant side? And that was something we learned after some decades of work with Christakis, that in spelling out a contract with a client, there's a tendency to view the facilitator as having all the responsibility. They're paying, the client's paying for services. But these events have many activities that the client is responsible for, such as making sure the participants review the preparatory materials, such as making sure that they're not going to be interrupted during the event with phone calls at the home office, such as extending the invitations to the participants, because the facilitator usually has no, at least in this practice, in interactive management, facilitator typically does not have domain expertise. It's not always the case, but and so it's the client that typically has the convening power. And if they don't have the convening power, they have to appeal to someone or hire someone that does have convening power. Or they need a bigger group of people that are sponsors of the event. So I had a half a dozen diagrams responding to Janet. I'll see how we go describing them verbally. Most of the things that...
Is there some noise behind you?
Hold on a second. Can you still hear me?
I can now.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm actually not at home. I'm in Lowell, Massachusetts today, taking care of a condo we own. I'm in a cafe.
Ah. Right, so we were talking about how there's responsibilities between the client and the
facilitator. And so one of the outlines that we have, it's not really a diagram, but I think most of the material in this playbook that come closest to diagrams are just outlines of things. And so one of the outlines we have, which I think is like the most critical, is a table. It's a table that has 82 actions, and next to it is a column for client side, and the next column is facilitator side, and it just says which action, who's responsible for which action. And sometimes they're joint responsibilities, and just dividing that up in it's a two-pager, and that's what I would typically give to if we were meeting the sponsor or the client executive in a briefing. This right at the outset. So this is what you're responsible for. This is what we're responsible for. Want us to step in to things you're responsible for. We may not be able to do it. It depends on what it is. And you're going to have to pay more for it. For example, we were doing a big event in the Pacific Northwest, which was the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. It was an agreement by the governors of the 4 Northwest states on the future of energy efficiency. And the person that they had acting as what we call a broker had some difficulties and never called any of the people he was supposed to invite to get the project going. And the client leaned on us to rescue them. And the problem was that we had no people didn't know us being from the domain or from the energy efficiency world. Nonetheless, the client expected it because we had not said explicitly that we wouldn't do it. That was the responsibility. So they just had presumed it. We never do it, so we didn't write explicitly that we don't do that. We've never done it for anybody. So that's kind of I think, a critical, very useful table. It's not just a playbook of how to conduct these events, but it's also a contracting tool. Another diagram that we have is what we call an architecture of structured dialogue events. And imagine a pyramid, and the top of the pyramid, its narrowest section, is the structured diagram that you might see come out of the turbostructural modeling. And it's what we call the stakeholders, issues, and themes. And it's kind of the top of the iceberg, scratching the surface. And below, and that's what we might come out with after some interviews with people in the client side and several advisors, looking at some literature. It depends on the scale of the project budget, how much you can do that, especially how much to do literature review. Also depends on the domain. So for example, projects in the medical world, most of the things they can discuss had already been written about. They may be incoherent, and that's why we're doing it. I was involved in a project like that with the birth of the patient safety movement. The literature is completely incoherent, fictional. And but it's a place to start. In some projects, like structured democratic dialogue, a lot of what they do in Cyprus they don't do any literature review. What they're really interested is in the opinions of the people that are coming to an event. They're not trying to establish some scientific foundation of something or resolve some technical disagreement. They just want the participation, so then we'll do it all. So that's the thing at the top, stakeholders, issues, and themes. And then beneath that, we do some deeper analysis. If we're able to get into the literature, we get what we might identify as critical problems about the domain. And so we've extended a first interpretive structural model with a second, deeper one that builds towards the roots of the problem. And it's similar to what they call in total quality management cause analysis. It's, some people don't even, in fact, there's a rebranding effort by Christakis at one point where he stopped calling this phase of dialogue, he stopped calling it interpretive structural modeling or structural modeling. He just started calling it root cause analysis. I confronted him about, how does that pertain to when you're using structural modeling to do action planning? He still called it root cause analysis. It didn't make any sense to me, but that's what he did, and that's what the name, where one of the names comes from. When you try to find deeper influences in a structure. When we would typically take those two things, the stakeholder issues and themes and the critical problems from analysis of the literature, and we would put that out in a white paper and to the participants. And they would get that we would get that a couple weeks before an event. Most of them read it on the plane on the way to the event, fortunately, except for a select few. And then during the first day of the event, day and a half, we would do a structure of collective challenges. We wouldn't imply a meeting of that structure to the previous structures. We kind of treat it a bit independent because of the deep philosophy of the uniqueness of a situation, and the word situation has a deep meaning going back to systems planning view of things back in the 1960s or earlier. But that's the next part down the pyramid, and it's wider because there's more people involved in generating that idea. And the thing we would connect next is a structure of action options, and then combinations of actions may be done in multiple small groups, and that's even wider. That's towards getting towards the base of the pyramid. Detailed collaborative action plan. And that's at the base of the pyramid. And, any questions? I'll go to the next one.
It sounds like a very well thought out process, but you seem to be implying that there's kind of a two-step process in the same event. Or is that two different events?
Two-step process.
Yeah, where you said you had one piece and then you had a deeper one that's kind of called a root cause analysis.
Right. Yeah. When there's a historical aspect to that. There's a history and a deep history. When during the 70s and 80s, they tried out a lot of, Warfield and Christakis and their acolytes, tried out a lot of different structural types, meaning what they call application structural types. So an example is an action plan, where the nodes are actions and the arrows are precedents or influence or causation. In the Warfield had outlined 60 or 70 different transitive relations, and depending on which relations you combine with what the nodes represent, you can end up with many, many types of structural application, structural types, as they call them. When Christakis broke away from Warfield, Christakis had to leave Warfield at GMU because his wife got sick and she had cancer, and she wanted to be near her family in Philadelphia. So he left academia, and he said, okay, let's see if we can make this fly in the private sector as a consultancy. And he started a CWA, Christakis Whitehouse Associates, in Philadelphia, right where he was, near Philadelphia, is a pharmaceutical industry corridor. So a lot of the cases he did were in the pharmaceutical sector. And he wanted to kind of simplify and brand what he was doing. One, he came up with a new name, was the Cognoscope, search for knowledge. It's a new Greek word he coined. It was kind of a breaking away from interactive management. And he also he settled on two types of application structural types. The problematique, which is the problems are the nodes, and the aggravation is are the arrows, and the action part, where actions are the nodes, influence or precedents are the arrows. And these are an ideal engagement as doing an analysis of the problems, then the action plan as the solution. And he's just settled on it, and he said that's what the Cognoscope is, these two application structural types. Warfield contracted even more. I mean, Warfield went from outlining dozens and dozens of different application structural types and trying a bunch of them. And then by the time that he got sponsored by Ford in the late 80s, he only worked on one application structural type for the rest of his life, and that was problematiques. I'm not sure why he did that. That's part of a deep background, but a deeper history to the breakdown of focusing on problems first and then solutions. This is really goes back to the dawn of the Enlightenment, where you have to analyze your problems first before you work on solutions. This is a Western science mindset, and there's been a breakaway from that. For example, in the community development world, it says they have what's emerged, they call a strengths-based approach. Because people would come in from the federal government and academia into beleaguered urban neighborhoods, and they would proceed to analyze their problems. And after 30 years or 40 years of the elites analyzing the problems at the core, there was a rebellion by social workers and sociologists. And they say, wait, we're going to take a strengths-based approach. We know what all the problems are. We've been telling the elites for 40 years what the problems are, and it hasn't really helped. Let's go in and ask, when's the last thing something worked? anywhere. I said, let's make the list of the assets that the community has. Who can do something? What skills do people have? What infrastructure is there that might not be used? And kind of developing a structure of directors. Let's take this asset, this skill, and combine it and do something. So it's not necessary that you have to start with a definition of the problem. Christakis never accepted that. People in a structured dialogue can't see doing anything besides problem critiques and action plans. But as I've pointed, as we pointed out over the last few years, structured dialogue could be all of them, many of the modeling relationships necessary for
Kevin,
language. Yep.
I didn't catch what you said, the last few things. You said Christakis never accepted.
Sorry, you broke up. What did you say?
Yeah, the audio is not good here. You said Christakis never accepted something.
Oh, he never accepted the idea of a strengths-based approach.
Right, okay.
He would never do an action plan without doing a problem critique, for example. He didn't think you could do it because that's his mindset, is Western science.
Right. Okay, I understand. But so you say that Christakis is the one who focused. I don't know if you can hear me well enough, but Christakis is the one who focused on the complement between the problematique and the optionatique. But I know we have seen Warfield also talk about the optionatique in like a article for SRBS. So, but you think that was more Christakis's focus?
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, I'm giving up.
Well, maybe I can step in here.
Your audio is better.
Yeah, step in there and just point out that it's what I heard Kevin describe. Didn't see the details, but the pyramid, it's fairly interesting because Warfield did the idea of a quad. So he did a quad pyramid that had these types of things essentially that we're talking about, where you have alternatives, actions, select and then select your actions and then move to your target. So Warfield originally wrote the paper and published the paper on his own. And then I think a year or so after that, Warfield and Christakis together updated that specific paper.
Which paper?
It's on, I will basically send that out later, but it's on the quads and the tapestries. And I think it was done in the middle to late 80s. But anyway, so it was interesting to me that basically there was almost two versions of the same thing, very, very little difference. And first was Warfield, then was Warfield Christakis. And then later on, it became clear that the interpretations of the specific components that were put into the pyramid varied. And so that became, to me anyway, the pyramid and the quad itself as an abstract an abstract process. And then what happens at each transition layer is dependent upon what those specific components are. Now, I know it's a lot of hand waving, but anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. And
I think they made a big point of that in the Handbook of Interactive Management and in the book, The Science of Generic Design. These he's structuring things in terms of plots. And I was looking at that several months ago because I'm editing the Handbook of Interactive Management for a new edition with Roxanne and Cardenas. And I realized that was my understanding of what they were talking about with that. Christakis never did that after he left working with Warfield. He never did the quads. What he did was he would cluster things into groups of similarity, maybe a dozen clusters or something. And he never structured within the clusters, which the quads call for you to do additional work. And I'm not sure why it was why that was seemed to be dropped, or it could be that I don't really understand quads work. But when I was reading, I was like, wow, I've never seen or heard of Christakis doing it. He's never talked about it. What I was familiar with, what he did after he generates ideas, he would just have people cluster them into things of similarity, vote on what they felt was important, and then start to interpret a structural model. He never did any more manipulation that would take you into what they were calling the quads and the tapestries.
Yeah.
I wonder if any of Warfield's followers have continued that over the years.
You know, I looked for that, and I really have found very little evidence that people have actually implemented any of those. But it seems to me that it provides the abstract structure where you can have concurrent teams, and each concurrent team working on a different quad. And then you can have an integration team that's integrating the output from those quads into a tapestry. And you need some kind of feedback loop. So that becomes a fairly difficult or a fairly, substantial information management situation, depending upon how quickly you want that feedback loop to work. But I think there's a lot of insight and a lot of new information, I think, once you start looking at the quads and the tapestries. And what we hope to do, what Mary and I have been working on, we've been working on the actual relationships, the logical relationships, and how they work. And next month, we hope to talk a little bit more about why we think you can use the clustering or classification process and the strict ordering process to address most all of the activities that are going on, but you either have to do them sequentially or parallel. So there's kind of an interesting thing there. So anyway, that's kind of all I'll say about that.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that raises when we talk about having teams in parallel working different quads, having to be integrated is the need. I think something that is an important innovation to consider now is how to integrate techniques from social network analysis with the process aspects, because all of Warfield and Christakis' work was focused on the artifacts, the design artifacts, the planning artifacts, the actions, the problems, the structures. They didn't talk about the relationships of the people to different aspects of the problem. There's almost nothing written about that aspect of it. Something I spent over the last 2 years. I went through some courses on social network analysis and network analysis. Warfield would talk about for what he called the TOTOS, the Task-Oriented Transient Organization.
Mm-hmm.
He has a few pages written about it, but no specifics. And not the key aspect of the people side is how the participants in the dialogue represent the stakeholders, and how when you do an action plan, do you assemble, do network formation of the stakeholders into small groups that may be spanning organizational boundaries, the way that has been done before, in order to do a project. The number of projects I worked on had from 12 to 48 different organizations involved in the dialogue. The action would require maybe 7 different organizations that had never collaborated before to talk about each other. There's no guidelines out there.
Right. So that gets back to your whole project with the playbook, that there's a lot that is left ad hoc and implicit. And I have to leave, but I wanted to say that the way you described when you first got on the logic of why the playbook was needed, I think you could basically transcribe what you said, and you have your introduction. I thought that was a very compelling story, and looking forward to hearing more when we have better connection. It's great work. And if he didn't hear me, Joe, maybe you can repeat that. Okay.
Did you get that, Kevin?
Not quite. I think it's breaking up.
You seem to have quite a bit of background noise, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn off my audio.
Well, that's okay. I think we'll be stopping the broadcast because people have to go now. So, and then if you stay on just a little bit after I stop the broadcast here, just need to figure out how to do it.